quick disclaimer before I start. I am going to be talking about realism and authenticity. I am not in any way talking about how that affects the gameplay. If you quickly want my opinion on that, I think the gameplay of Battlefield 1 is great. It's brilliant, you know. I mean, it could use some tweaking, but I think it does the Battlefield formula very nicely, and in some ways better than Battlefield 4, because you don't have lock-on missile launchers and stuff like that. So that's my opinion on the gameplay. However, this is not about that. This is about the realism. I will not be relating the realism to the gameplay, and stuff like that. I just won't be talking about gameplay, purely about the realism. Battlefield 1 has an interesting problem. This has been talked about over and over and over and over again by millions of different people, that Battlefield 1 does not feel like a World War I game. It feels like a World War II at very best game, or at very earliest, I suppose. And obviously that's to preserve its gameplay, because a true World War I game would use only bolt-action rifles, and maybe like 1 in 10 players would have the privilege of using something like a Lewis light machine gun, or even like an emplacement. And a game like Verdun does this very well, because they're striving for realism there. But Battlefield 1, obviously it wants that Battlefield experience, that Battlefield formula, and so it doesn't do that. But I'm going to talk about, specifically, like I've said, the realism aspect. Battlefield 1 is filled with automatic weapons. It's totally filled with automatic weapons. You've got submachine guns that only existed very late war, or they were only prototypes. You've got the medic automatic weapons that never existed, were only prototypes, or are extremely late war. And that you've got support weapons that didn't exist, prototypes, very late war. And all of this, obviously, is in keeping to give it gameplay, and a good gameplay sense, because if you didn't have weapon variety, if you're on the British side and you only had a Lee Enfield and a Lewis gun, like in 1 in 10, then it would be boring. It would be extremely boring, and it wouldn't be Battlefield. But I think that's really a problem with a game like Battlefield 1, because it's so split in what it's trying to do, which is really weird to me. So Battlefield 1, it's gone for this really gritty style, at least through its opening intro, where it's like the Harlem Hellfighters holding their position. That goes for a really sort of gritty, realistic, somber sense that, you know, this is a war where millions of people died, sadly, and over not particularly much. Sadly, as with most wars, I suppose. And they've gone for this specific tone, especially through the campaigns, the war stories as well. It's gone for this tone that really tries to honour the people who fought in this war, as it should. You know, it's something that deserves to be remembered. It's the war to end all wars, although it just wasn't. And they establish a tone through that. Their music choice, their choice in gameplay, their choice in campaigns. They establish a tone through that, and then in the multiplayer, and even in the campaigns, to be honest, they completely get rid of it with the weapon choice. Jesus Christ. Through Mud and Blood, this is one example that I can really remember in my head. At one point, you fight some German troops, you should kill them all, unless you're bad, and you can find on their bodies a Schlebschlatter, the medic automatic, magazine-fed automatic weapon. And that really stuck in my mind as sort of, why? Not why. I understand why, but it betrays a certain inauthenticity within them trying to make it authentic. DICE trying to make it authentic. It betrays an inauthenticity in that, in the fact that these guns, they weren't widely used, and yet it's just this strange oxymoron, this strange contrast between a desperate attempt to make it as authentic and as somber and as impactful as possible, and then they throw in these weapons for variety and gameplay reasons. Again, I'm not going to talk about that. And that sort of kills the mood. Maybe that's just for me. I don't know. This is my problem with Battlefield, but I'm just going to have my problems here. My problem with Counter-Strike, my problem with Battlefield 1. But it really ticks me off, because I know, sadly, maybe it would be better if I didn't, but I know that these are not World War I weapons that were widely used. And I know that that sort of pulls me out. It pulls me out of the experience. It means I'm not fully engaged because like, oh, it's an interesting weapon to find here. And it just detracts from that whole experience, and I think really what they've gone for is just this contrast between the two. The authenticity and the inauthenticity of their weapon choice and their campaign, but the other way around. And that's what really annoys me about all of their weapon choices and their tonal choice in this, is that they really do not line up, sadly. Sure, it makes for a compelling game if you can turn off your mind and not think about the weapons, or the campaign, or both, but ultimately it really detracts from the experience if you think about it, because maybe I'm just being like far too anal about this. I just can't. There's just a certain part of me that thinks, no, no, you've tried to craft this experience where, you know, you're playing soldiers who are, you know, cool, and you're playing soldiers who are giving up their lives for a war with little purpose, or that's how they present it, and yet you're trying to craft an authentic experience through that, but then the weapons betray an inauthenticity, as I've already said. So I don't know. I think that was a really interesting thing, and I don't think you can really fix that with World War One. You can't make World War One both authentic and a battlefield experience. I don't think you can properly do either justice if you try to go for both. If you try to go for the battlefield experience, you obviously lose out on the authenticity because you throw in lots of automatic weapons, as they've done, and I think that was the right choice in this situation. They went for the gameplay over the realism, which I think is something that you should do every time, but still, I'm still gonna rant about the realism anyway. Or you can go for realism and completely sacrifice the battlefield formula, because you won't have tons of tanks running around, you won't have automatic weapons, you will rarely see the fighter planes, you know, you won't see these great bombers and fighter planes every single match constantly flying over, and you won't get rocket guns for every fourth person, you know. You would completely destroy the battlefield formula for the sake of realism. And that's something that shouldn't be done. You've got to strike a balance, and I think the balance that the devs have found here is, while still questionable, I think it's probably the best choice they could have made. And this leads me on to my final point, that maybe Battlefield 1, or maybe World War 1, wasn't the right choice to start with, at least from the standpoint of being really pedantic about authenticity. If you don't care, if you're just sort of a more casual player who doesn't really look into the guns and the history and all of that, then, or you just don't mind, or you just don't care, then you can enjoy the game like this, obviously, and you have no qualms with it because you're enjoying it and you don't care. Or you can't care because you don't know about the things, which makes me sound really big-headed. But anyway, either that, or you just can't fall in love with this sort of experience, because it's inauthentic ultimately, isn't it? And obviously the cost of gameplay. Perhaps World War One wasn't meant for the battlefield thing, because, you know, you got to sacrifice a lot of realism to get it lining up with the battlefield formula. And honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I think Battlefield 1 might have been better, or might have been better for me. Might have been better, let's go that. Might have been better for me if it was a World War II game. And that's simply because you retain the Battlefield 1 gameplay as established, or you retain nearly all of it. You lose, obviously, the lock-on stuff, but no one liked that anyway. You retain that, and you still get to have your authenticity. And looking at the gaming market now, while I think Battlefield 1 was a really interesting experience with going all the way back 100 years, you look at the way things are going with the supposed Call of Duty World War II and Battalion 1944 and games like that, the entire industry is really shifting towards this World War II setting, and maybe Battlefield 1 should have gone with World War II to give it a better balance and to fit in with the market, but maybe Battlefield 1 with World War 1 was the right choice, because one, it gives them diversity from the market. They're not a face in the crowd. They are a standout World War One experience. They stand out from the crowd, but then they don't follow the trend. They're this awkward standout thing where it's sort of inauthentic and sort of strange in its gameplay ideas due to its realism, or lack thereof. But anyway, maybe World War II was the right choice, maybe it wasn't. And I think the only way to really see that was if they actually made or make a World War II game. Then we'll see if it's the right choice. But you really can't see whether it's the right choice from just this, from just what's happening now. And I think trying to make a call on that is a bit weird, because you can never know, really. But I think I fall on the side of maybe it would have been better. For me, it would have been better. Because I think for some people it wouldn't have made much difference, because you'd still get a similar gameplay experience, because both games, because Battlefield 1 feels like a World War II game a lot of the time. You'd get similar experiences there, and you'd get the similar authenticity, you get the similar feeling, because they're only 20 years apart. So I don't know, you wouldn't get a similar feeling, but you'd feel it. But anyway, this was a really unscripted and unstructured video, and I just wanted to get it out because I thought it might be interesting to talk about it, even though everyone else in the gaming scene has talked about it already. I just thought it was a thing that I wanted to talk about because I like my realism, sort of, especially when it comes down to guns and stuff in these games. Although I don't, it's a strange oxymoron of my life. But anyway, I'm completely out of breath because I've been non-stop talking and not breathing. But there it is. So, was Battlefield 1 meant to be a World War II game? In my eyes, maybe. Thank you guys for watching. Have fun.